all the motorboat noises that one may make about, but why just those two criteria for the map? Shouldn't it be like the super map of every event in the backstory? Shouldn't this be like the huge map of crazy of the whole backstory and what everybody has done and what how everybody knows of this, or a knowledge map, a who did what to whom map? I mean, everything. That doesn't work as well. If you want to argue about why or anything like that, that's just off the table right now because I'm not interested. It doesn't work as well. I'm not saying that one doesn't have notes about all those things. I mean, this relationship map, it's not like you don't go into play just waving that around and that's your one reference for anything. No, but having it right there as a reference point for everything else that's going on and everything else that has happened in the backstory as well is extraordinarily powerful and focusing, because you can say this is when this guy breaks the bonds of brotherhood. This is when this guy breaks the, or affirms the past romantic history. And those have punch. When I mean punch, I mean it in two ways. One is how it feels when you do it. That sense of rightness. They do this, I think, is quite authentic. And then that thing that I said not to worry about actually counterintuitively now appears as a social and creative phenomenon as people respond better. The fiction is better. The sense of satisfaction with what's going on, with whether this involves actual revelation to the other character, the player characters, is a secondary thing. After all, this relationship map, you'll notice that to a great extent in fiction, such a backstory is also tied to asymmetrical information, stuff that, in our case, players don't know. It doesn't have to be, actually. I mean, there's nothing that says that by definition the relationship map is, a secret. But in a lot of cases, it can be. So that's why I say revelation is sometimes involved when asymmetry is involved, and when that plays into the events. But as I say, think of that as an add-on, or as a factor that may or may not apply for a given game. So with any luck, that can help understand or help one understand this. We are talking about a highly specific thing. Um, if we're just talking about, having backstory and asymmetrical information, fine. Note it however you want, whatever works for you. There's nothing about making this diagram that is magical if that's all we're talking about. But if we are talking about playing non-player characters and entities in a fashion where you are reacting by in playing them, and are able to keep out of your mind, and are learning perhaps to keep out of your mind how it's going to look, how it's going to be. Oh, this'll jazz things up. Oh, this'll do this, this'll do that. Getting that out of your mind is a big part of an eventual, actually, it's quite fast, but shall we say a subsequent powerful sense of authenticity in play. That's what I've got for that question. And I hope it made some sense and may be applicable outside of Sorcerer to some for some reasons. I can think of some recent play in which it was quite relevant in a non-Sorcerer game. But it is particularly strong in that game, in that kind of emphasis. And that's how it was presented. Well, what next? Who have we next? Whom have we next? Alan asks, this question keeps coming up for me, but I can't find the answer in the book. Can a character fire off two separate slots of an elemental control simultaneously in one attack? Well, in fairness, I knew it was about Champions Now, because it was in that part of the Discord, so it's not completely out of the blue. It is a Champions Now question. And there are several different variables that have to get teased apart. The best way to look at this is that an attack is built of one or more powers. They're listed as powers in the book. Should have taken Rod's advice and called them components, and let the word power be a fictional entity, and then you build powers with one or more components. With your permission, I'm going to stick with that. So, a power as built does what it does with the components that have been assigned to it, period. And one may make an attack as a half phase action. And if you make one and you have half phase left, you're out of luck. Once you've made an attack, you're done for your turn. So therefore, think of an attack as a very full commitment to your go. When it's your time for your character to act, if you make an attack, you're not making any other attacks. Now, that means that when it says make an attack, that may involve more than one component because we already knew that. It is written down. This zap is composed of this component and that component, like a blast and a flash or something. But they are there. They are defined in there. There's no game mechanic that formally links them. You have assigned them in that fashion. This applies universally. There is no exception. With something called a variable power pool, you can dismantle and rebuild, powers in play, and there's nothing wrong with that. But again, as built, that's the situation. That particular zap is made of that or those particular components. Done. And that's a single roll. So if you zap a person and you're rolling to hit and you hit with the blast, you're also hitting with the flash. Use the worst of the details if they're different in range and stuff like that. So that's the first thing, just to understand about attacks and powers. They're called powers in the book, but better yet, powers that are attacks built of one or more components is the better way to phrase it. Now, what does any or all of this have to do with elemental controls? Since you can only make one attack on your go, you can't fire off two separate slots of an elemental control simultaneously in one attack. You just can't, because those are separate powers. That's all. If you're using an attack power with however many components, locked into it, you're not going to be using another one. Every slot of an elemental control is, in fact, a power, one power, built of however many components. Now, you can, of course, use multiple slots of an elemental control, including things that aren't powers. For example, you can throw up your force field at the beginning of your phase and then make your attack. The throwing up that force field is a zero phase action. You can do it at the end or the beginning of your phase. So it takes no time. And it's not itself an attack. So it hasn't eaten up any of your, phase options or anything like that. It's just something you can do at that particular point. Okay, it's my turn. Okay, I throw on my force field and I zap the dude. Force field could be one of those elemental slots and the zap can be another. So using separate elemental control slots is fine as such. That doesn't overcome the more blanket or basic rule that when you make an attack, you are either, striking someone with a fist or something like that, or you are using a power. A power. I hope that helps. Um, the the notion that you can mix and match different, powers into an attack is actually not supported by the rules in any way, except for that funky variable power pool. But you do have to build them as if they were solid powers. So once you've done that, the very same rules apply. There's just no exception to that. So as far as the specific question about an elemental control, you cannot use two attacks from different slots of the elemental control at the same time. That cannot happen. One of those slots designated as an attack has to be used as an attack. Or if you have two such attacks in two different slots, use the other one instead. That's your option. Because that has nothing to do with actually being in an elemental control. That's just the fact that they are two different attack powers. So with any luck, this has clarified a bunch of things. For non-champions people, you should recognize that a great deal of that was technical and applied to some very specific rules, designations, and terms. More questions about that, if anyone is interested, are very welcome. Champions makes me happy, and I love to talk more about any and all of that stuff, or work a person through making up a character. Zapping a few zaps around is always a good time, and there's a lot to learn regarding the setup thereof. So I am currently playing the character Nope, who uses the name Audrey Villain, um, but who, as her big public celebrity teen superhero identity, but whose actual birth name is Conrad Luce, and who's in the naive youngest member or semi youngest member of a sprawling clan across Cuba and Miami, and being badly informed by absolutely everybody else in that complex of relations. See, this brings us back to that relationship map thing for your information. That's why I'm bringing it up. So I'm playing Nope, and I have found the pedagogical power of having somebody set up a now, as it's called, for play, and learning how that really works by doing it one-on-one has been extremely effective. So consider this a call for anyone who wants a little practice along those lines, because I'm having a really good time. Playing just a couple of sessions and doing this leaves us incredibly hungry for more, and it's very exciting. So consider yourselves invited. All right, with any luck, this helps. With the interesting footnote, unplanned, that it was actually playing champions in the 80s and the 90s that taught me the power of the technique in the first place. So, thanks to all.